Well, the reason we started on this journey was because we saw a secular decline in IPOs that really transcended economic cycles. We went from 90% of companies going public, technology, innovative companies, the kinds we're talking about today, 10, 20 years ago, to 90% selling themselves to smaller companies today. That creates fewer jobs. There's often less innovation that stays in the US as a result. And last, we're not building the kinds of large companies that are leaders in the markets today. Could we right-size some of the well-meaning regulations to tailor them to small companies so that we had a better path to going public? And yet, could we do that in a way that both provided returns for institutional investors, but kept the primary principle of investor protection in place? So what we did with the JOBS Act is come up with two definitions. One is we came up with this concept of an on-ramp, and secondly, we defined what an emerging growth company is. The on-ramp is the temporary transition that these companies have to the full regulations that apply to all companies, including them, once they're off the on-ramp. And secondly, we defined what an emerging growth company is. And we wanted to stimulate IPOs, and we wanted it to be a predictable target. So what we did was set revenue at $1 billion and public float at $700 million. Number one, it reduced the cost of going public. Things like Sarbanes-Oxley, the biggest single expense for a small company to go public, that's the external audit of the internal material weaknesses that small companies have to certify to regardless. That external audit is extremely expensive. That plus long-form compensation disclosures and other things means that companies take $4 million, and PwC came out with a study just recently, $4 million to go public. We think the benefit of the JOBS Act will be to reduce that by 30 to 50%. Secondly, and probably the piece that wasn't as focused on in the lead up to the JOBS Act, but has become very meaningful for CEOs, is confidential filings. What we're referring to is simply the drafting process with the SEC. It allows a CEO to go through a drafting process with the SEC confidentially so that their customers, and more importantly, their competitors, don't have a chance to pick apart their financials when A, they haven't decided whether or not they can then go public, and B, they don't know, even if they intend to, whether or not that can happen in the next 6, 12, 24 months. It's a very difficult time for CEOs. It makes it a huge reputational risk to even consider filing. So we've taken down the costs, we've taken down the reputational risk. The third thing we did was increase the visibility for institutional investors at the same time. During even that confidential filing period, we're now allowing institutional investors to test the waters and have communications both before, during, and after an IPO. First, you're never too small to affect change. Our industries are small, the entrepreneurs we back are small, and yet we were able to pass this. So people shouldn't be daunted about trying. Secondly, be persistent. These are topics that have been discussed for years, and we were able to be ready when the time was right to get something passed. Third, be tailored in your approach. When you come up with something, think about the legislators that you're aiming this for, and be sure that this is something that you think can be accomplished in a bipartisan fashion. Being tailored and listening to all sides of an argument, in this case, making sure that we hewed to the investor protection issues, was really important for its success. And last but not least, and this is one of the newest pieces, be sure to make room for the voice of the entrepreneur. One of the things we did as part of this was harness a lot of social media, Twitter, Facebook, blogs, and we're able to get the entrepreneurs who couldn't be in Washington for the conversation to be able to speak